This is My Taste is Better Than Yours, the manga podcast where Guardian Enzo and I, Samu, discuss some of our favourite series and figure out, is my taste better than yours? Welcome back, everybody. This is the second part of the discussion for the Succession Contest arc. Last week was part one, where we discussed everything to do with the Zodiacs, Beyond's expedition, Gon and Killua, the early chapters of the arc, including Hisoka and Crollo's rematch, and everything to do with the Phantom Troop as they are in the ship, as well as their flashback that we got. So we covered ground with a lot of familiar characters, and we haven't even touched the main point of the arc yet. So, without further ado, let's segue over then to the actual succession contest we have taking place on the boat, unknowing to many of the people who are on it. And comes from the Sea ceremony that all the princes take part in, where they get given a guardian Nen Beast, and Nen Beast is a concept we already had, but this definitely is Togashi expanding on that. Each of them has one of these beasts who are like overseeing them and like assisting them in this death match that we have. It's a very dense and complicated death match. But there are a few rules that Togashi's established here, which I'm like, again, making things complicated for yourself, but these beasts cannot be seen by the people who own them. They do not know that they're there, but there are other characters with potential to see them who we see throughout the series, obviously. So there is not an awareness that this is happening from the princes themselves. B, they cannot control them. They are beasts of their own will, but clearly there is some extension of what they are, and I think, and what we're seeing with their powers and their abilities is an extension of the characters themselves. And C, which is the beasts actually can't kill each other. So yeah, again, Togashi is this is, I think I've said this before, that there's some Greed Island here, where like he established rules there that he liked to work around that framework, and this is him escalating that and being like, okay, I'm going to set even more rules on top of Nen, on top of everything else, top of all these characters and all these factions. I'm just very, very interested, as always, to see how this comes together. The ship itself, even though the princes are aware that this is happening, some of them more than others who are clued into their father, King Naspi's intentions, assassination is not permitted. So everyone has to be sneaky. There are princes who have more power over others. The first prince has guards in every single other room, and that's a very selection. That's a large selection of cast that we tip into now and again. So yeah, this is a very dense battle between these new characters we're seeing. But am I probably right in thinking that this is maybe the part of the arc that you're not as emotionally connected to, Enzo?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I think when we talk about Togashi needing to consult his own notes when he goes back and writes this stuff, I suspect this is an area where that this is kind of what we're talking about. I've often suspected that, I've made the statement that Togashi tries things that most mangaka would be fools to try, because they would go down in a ball of flames if they ever tried to do some of the things he does. And I do wonder, even if he weren't in the fragile health situation he's in, let's be honest, most people in his situation, if they were determined to continue the series more or less without help, which it seems he is, they might, maybe they might streamline their expectations a little bit. They might kind of try not to do quite so much. And it seems like the more tenuous his situation gets, the more ambitious he tries to be. And I don't want to be hypocritical about it, because I think his ambition is what makes him so uniquely powerful as a mangaka. His ambition is why Chimera Ant is my number one ranked shonen arc of all time, because it's way more ambitious thematically than any other arc that I can think of. But I do think at times, with all this succession stuff, that he is biting off more than he can do. He may be overly ambitious in this part of the story. And I hope I'm wrong, but the evidence I see so far, I have to call it an open question. I'm not going to make a statement one way or the other. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. It is a concern for me, though, absolutely.
Whereas I'm more confident because, if I'm honest, this is actually my favorite part of the arc. There's something about it that really compels me, and I think the sheer ambition of it is just wild and crazy. What Togashi is attempting to do here, and if you do, the thing is, you have to intentionally be clued in on everything that's happening, I think, to get the experience. And I get that some people don't have the time, or so much is happening that maybe it's just not getting through to them, which is Tagashi's fault as well, you could argue, because sometimes it feels like he's doing it for himself. He knows the vision, and he's very comfortable with people not really getting it until perhaps it all comes at the end. But yeah, I can throw out a few names, and you can see if any of these characters do resonate with you, because there are various players in this game. We have Benjamin, who's the first prince, like I mentioned. He has all these guards who are involved with every other prince and overseeing them, and he is like theoretically in the best position. But he is being targeted as well, and I think he's not going to be an obvious winner. Togashi doesn't like to do the obvious. Other ones, we have the second prince, Camilla, who has one of the most bizarre Nen abilities, where uh, when she dies, her Nen is post mortem Nen, and that extracts the life of the killer and then revives her. So she's in this limbo state. Currently, she's imprisoned, I believe, but she's in this limbo state of like, how do you even deal with this character who is not the most fucked up of all the princes, but she's definitely on that side of them, I believe. You have others like who Kurapika are involved with. Wobble, who is the baby, but he also has allegiance with Zhang-Li, the third prince. And I think by extension of Wobble, I think Wobble's mother, Oito, is one of those characters that I do have an emotional connection with. I think she introduces herself very strongly when she brings Kurapika into the fold. When we are introduced to this other group of characters, are the guards that get brought on to look after these princes. And this is another chance where we see some familiar faces. We have Melody, who I love, and then we see others, Kurapika, obviously, Biscuit, and then various others, even from back to the Hunter exam with Hansel. So yes, we see familiar faces come in, and they're all split up amongst the different princes. And I think Oito and Kurapika have something that I think that's a very good like connection, and there's a nice dynamic there. And I'm rooting for Oito as a character as a result, because where she sits amongst all of this incredibly dense family dynamic. Yeah, and then other ones, we do have some that have already passed away. I believe now 3 have died, but then Kacho, who's one of the ones with her, like the younger sister, she is now in spirit form and she's working with Melody. We have Prince Hulkenberg, who quote unquote died, but he's also in this limbo state at the moment, and he is one of the, I think, probably fan favorites to win as well. So he's in quite a difficult spot. And then Tserriednich as well, who I'll talk about in more detail with Kurapika. Um, but yes, if I don't know if there's anyone else that in this cast of new characters that do stand out to you, but if that is the case, happy to hear. Otherwise, if you were to make just a very bold prediction at this point, who do you think is going to win, if any, in this succession contest arc? Knowing that this is Togashi, and it's often not the obvious answer. Like, do you have a prediction of how this could go?
Yeah, yeah, as you say, it's kind of hard with so many. I feel like, maybe Tserriednich, if that's how you pronounce it. Yeah, I guess it is. He seems like the obvious to me. You said, Benjamin is kind of the obvious, and he doesn't like to go to the obvious. I feel like that's the case with Tserriednich, that he's being set up as the obvious winner because his Nen skills seem to be kind of off the charts, and also because he seems to be pretty sociopathic in a lot of ways. Like to the point where like even the people around him are kind of terrified of him. Um, the one I kind of like, curiously enough, is Zhang Li, who is kind of the most nondescript of them in many ways. He doesn't even know what his net ability is, as far as I know.
Yeah, the coins.
But the coins. But there's just something about him that I find very kind of interesting in a quiet, understated sort of way. And I feel like Kurapika respects him. And when Kurapika respects somebody, you pay attention to them in the story because Kurapika is pretty hard to get his respect. Um, as far as who's going to win, I don't have a freaking clue. My tendency is to say none of the above because having any one of the princes win, quote unquote, would be kind of a conventional route for him to go. And I have a suspicion that one way or another that the whole succession contest is going to get mooted something is going to happen that's going to make it irrelevant. And that would be the more Togashi way. If one of the princes was going to win, I mean, I would almost be tempted to say someone like the 13th Prince, Mariam, who's kind of like this cipher character who's barely involved in the story, or something like that. It would be far too obvious if Benjamin or Tserriednich wins. But I just feel like it. I feel like the answer one. I don't know how he's going to arrive at it, but I feel like the where he will arrive in the end is none of the above. I just don't know how the mechanics of it are going to work.
See, I've touched on this before, but I'm one of those people that if I'm not a fan of when something is interrupted, like a tournament arc. So I'm not gonna lie, I would be a little disappointed if we're set up for so much and it kind of doesn't have some resolution. I feel like having no one win. I trusted Togashi could make it work in a satisfying way if the point would be that everyone consumes themselves in this process. I also don't envision that like every one of these characters are going to die or be like taken out of the picture. Um, so yeah, I'm almost inclined as well to go with one of the last two princes, Mariam and Wobble. I think Mariam is the one who his abilities related. Well, he has this thing with where his room is like this separate space from everyone else. So for that obvious reason, he is like excluded from being like taken out by anyone in the other ways that various other princes have been. Hulkenberg, I think, was a favorite for some people, but he's in a very tense position right now where I think him and Benjamin
Yes.
are going to end up taking each other out. Um, Zhang Li, I think, for the benefit of the people, probably one of the better ones. He's not like morally perfect in any way, but he's definitely on more that side of things, and he has intentions of when he does become ruler. So yeah, I think maybe potentially him as well, because as you say, he is one of the ones that Kurapika has brought into his alliance. Um, but yeah, I think the big names like Tserriednich, Camilla as well, potentially, Hulkenberg, I think they're going to have a lot of focus, but not be there at the very, very end. That's my thinking.
But then again, if you look at what he did with the election, in the end, he went with the most obvious answer, really, which was both in the temporary and in the long term solution. It was exactly kind of who you thought it would or should have been from the beginning.
Mm,
So who knows?
yeah. Well, so Kurapika and Tserriednich, we haven't seen this confrontation yet. Based on what you said, it seems like you're probably more thinking that Kurapika's focus will not shift to the Phantom Troop, but this established connection, this like confrontation that Tserriednich doesn't know is going to happen. You think that is maybe what's going to be the climax of Kurapika's arc? Is that where you're thinking at the
If
moment
I
as
was
well?
going to bet between those two possibilities, I would be more inclined to bet on that possibility. I don't think
Which
those
is,
are the only two possibilities, but I think that's the more likely of the two.
and I think a lot of things are obviously going to happen between that, anything getting to that stage as well. Uh, when we talked about characters in precocious situations and like where their fate is from now, people do bring up, is Kurapika going to die in the Succession Contest arc? One thing worth noting is his ability, Emperor Time, which is very powerful, but he leaves it on by accident for 12 hours, which people have calculated has taken away 5 to 10 years of his life. So there is a lot of chance where either by accident or being consumed by his goal for revenge, he might trip over himself and his abilities. I think Togashi is definitely planting that seed of like, this character is not destined for a long, thriving life. I think his focus being so on the revenge is going to, I think, in some way consume him. Even if I were seeing him at the moment, he seems quite level headed. He's got everything together in terms of trying to
Yeah, he's a
figure out
good actor. He's a good actor.
he has the logistics of this arc down as best as anyone can, considering how little he actually knows the full scope of. He's teaching all these people Nen, which is potentially going to throw things off. So that's like an ongoing storyline as well. There's an assassin in his room. He's trying to figure out who that is. Again, all these storylines. And then there's another storyline that got added, which I am personally very, very interested in. And I remember when it happened, I think it was the first chapter back, and you were like, do we think it's too much at this point, what Takashi's adding in? But we have the reveal that Beyond Netero is involved in the succession contest in some way, even though we haven't seen him. He is, well, we haven't seen him much. He's imprisoned on the ship and he's being watched by the Zodiacs. He has his finger in this succession contest, and he has multiple children throughout the guards. And at least, or we're told, or we're meant to believe that one of the princes is his child, and is pushing an agenda behind the scenes for them to win. I would ask who you think it is, but there is a pretty strong fan consensus that it is Tserriednich, because a lot of people think that Tserriednich looks very similar to the young Netero who we did see in flashbacks, and I definitely see that similarity. And I think
Yes, I do too.
that might be a way for when we do get more into Tserriednich, get more into his character beyond what we're seeing at the moment. I think that could be some emotional connection that, like, if this is the family line, the direction it's gone in, yeah, it'll be like this weird tainted way that the Netero name has evolved. So, yes, we've got so many other potential ways that this could play out. I think this is a very fascinating section of the story, and I have to like pick my brain, and I like getting involved with the fandom each time it comes around, and we have to like break down what's happened. Even if with each batch of chapters, it's like, okay, one more prince has died. We have 9 more, or 10 more, or 8 more still to go. So I'm waiting for the moment where something horrible happens, and like it all just like comes tumbling down from there. Which I think might happen at any moment potentially.
I mean, if we're going to talk about who Beyond Sun is, I know Togashi loves to do the cross up, but it's hard to see how it could be anybody else.
Is this the
really.
anticlimax? Is this when it's like,
It could be. It
yeah,
could be because it almost has to be him to me. It almost has to be him. But the other thing is that doesn't mean he's going to win or anything. That just means he could be Beyond Sun and still lose. And Kurapika could in fact be the vehicle for him losing. That's very possible. The other thing that kind of interests me, we talk about the last two princes. I mean, Kurapika is Woble's bodyguard, but the other thing about Mariam, who is kind of the odd prince out in so many ways, he has like his status feels the most unexplored to me because he's got two very prominent, very familiar characters in his retinue. He's got Bisky and he's got Hanzo, who are prominent characters, especially Bisky, obviously, but prominent characters in the story that we know well as bodyguards. But that arc, that kind of subset of the whole succession thing has been almost totally unexplored with almost no screen time. So it feels like that's being set up to be something a lot more significant than it is right now. That's how I feel about it. Wobble we know is significant because Kurapika himself is in that group. He is that group really, but I even also Mariam too. That feels like there's something more there that he's setting up to tap into in the future that he hasn't tapped into yet. That's the vibe I'm getting.
I think the other theory that I had, Togashi's going to have to make some connections to make it work, maybe in terms of timeline, is if it's not Tserriednich, then what if Wobble is Beyond
Could
Netero's
be.
son? And because then that would also give Oito this place of like, is Oito aware? Is she part of this plan? Because obviously she's the mother of Wobble. And she's like very much in the peripheral of the game, being the very last wife of the various wives involved. And that would add, I think, blemish to like Kurapika's allegiance with Oito and Wobble. If this like complication comes into it, I think that would actually be the most interesting direction we go. But I also am confident that if it is Tserriednich, that is going to amplify him and then also establish that confrontation that he'll have with Kurapika. I think those would be my
Can
two
I?
guesses. But yeah, I think Mariam could be a big player in some ways, even if he is similar to Wobble, not doing the moves himself. When Bisky and Hanzo are going to be involved, Bisky looking after a little boy, she is not going to go down easy. When she hasn't had the chance to like
No,
do much,
no.
but
She's
I
got
would
mom energy.
she's got mom energy. I think I think Mariam actually maybe has the best protection, both in terms of numbers, but also in terms of like a character who will go down with Mariam.
And Hanzo is no slouch either. Hanzo is a pretty tough character.
Yeah,
And
Mel.
you know,
I was going to say
go
Melody
ahead.
of this group of familiar characters we have. Melody is the one who we're seeing quite a bit, along with Kurapika, who's looking after Kacho, who did die, but then her guardian spirit has this connection with her sister Fugitsu, who's just going
Yep.
through a horrible time right now, and she's potentially running on borrowed time with where she is mentally and physically. But it feels like we're setting up for Melody having quite a big part in the all the schemes that are happening right now, and she's catching the attention of various other princes because she has this ability with her music that alleviates fatigue and like illnesses, and it like causes
Yep.
this stillness, this hallucination, which I think if any other princes want to weaponize that. Very obviously, one of them is going to grab a hold of her and try and use that to their benefit. So, yes,
She's
I do.
also seems to be she seems to be very strongly karmically connected to Kurapika. Like where he's important, she's never too far from the story nowadays. And like when Kurapika is in his darkest place, and it really feels like he may be slipping on the edge, it could very easily be Melody who steps in as the one who tries to, on some last ditch way, to reel him back in. And I feel like Kurapika has always had this. He's had this part of him, this darkness, this rage, and it cuts to the point of being this self-destructive, self-loathing thing that goes along with it, this survivor's guilt. And I feel like Hisoka, who is exceptionally, as we know, exceptionally good at reading people and exceptionally smart in addition to all his other qualities, he spotted that in Kurapika very, very early on, and he has been more or less kind of he's been seeing Kurapika as like, okay, this is someone I can use because I can exploit this, and I feel like he's kind of held that in reserve most of the time. Periodically played that card, and kind of like on the opposite side is Melody, who's like she's always the one who's trying to pull him away from that part of him that Hisoka exploits, that drives him into this path of self-destruction. She's like the one who's always trying to be a lifeline for him and trying to pull him back. So it feels like as long as Kurapika is important to the story, Melody is going to be important to the story. And if one of them goes out of the story, they could go out of it together in some way, shape, or form.
Even since York knew, Melody has kind of replaced the bonds that Kurapika had with the main group because he'd been so separate
Yep.
for them for most of the story. And in a cast as expansive as this, like I firmly believe that Melody will be like, if not top five, like top 10 most important narrative characters within this arc. The place she's going to hold with her ability, but also where she stands for Kurapika, and like how she, yeah, where if she's going to be his rock, because she is one of the most like beautiful, pure characters in the series who can just cut through everyone's bullshit. I would be genuinely really sad if anything bad happens to her. So Yes, I hope that's not the case. I'm sure if Togashi does do that, it's going to be extremely, extremely painful. And then the final part I want to touch on is something he introduced a while ago as well, which is the mafia families. In case you didn't have enough characters that you
Yes.
need to memorize, there are three mafia families, each of which has a benefactor, and each of which also is ruled by an illegitimate child of King Nasabi. So maybe these all are potential candidates who want to take a position of power as well. So there's the Heil-ly, the Char, and the Hyouge, which are respectively have the benefactors of Tserriednich, the fourth prince for Heil-ly. Char has Lazarus, the seventh one. He's the like stoner one who is also kind of in the background, but I feel like there's going to be more with him eventually. And then Zhang Li has the Hyouge uh, family as well. All this is a whole other layer of the ship that this is going down in. The Phantom Troop are with the Char family trying to take out the Heil-ly. Hyouge family, they have probably the most prominent character of all of the mafia is Hendrik. We see him in his group that he has with their weird men abilities, but who we, at the time we thought was the real Hisoka, I thought was quite a nice scene of them in the cinema together, which was like taking a break from all this mafia madness. But I think Hendrik is going to play quite a prominent role within this storyline. The Char family, like I said, they are involved with the Phantom Troop. They're utilizing them to get rid of the Heil-ly family. And they're currently going through the between the layers of the ship, and they're trying to fight against Morena. But then there's like yet another twist in the latest batch where Kenny Wang, who's the underboss of the Char family, seems to be recruited by Morena as part of her ability. So like, is the Char family just already part of Heil-ly? Yeah, they're gonna this whole group is gonna cannibalize each other as well, I believe, and must bleed into the succession contest in some way. Otherwise, I don't know why Togashi is introducing it. I mean, the latest batch of chapters had three and a half chapters of Morena playing her card game with Borkson, who's one of
Yes.
Tserriednich's childhood friends, and she's trying to recruit her, and we're potentially seeing that go down. But in classic Togashi fashion, he was like, "Okay, I'm going to go into every minute detail of this little game that's happening between these two tertiary characters in the
I
story."
really enjoyed that, by the way.
Oh, really? I was wondering if that was a part where you were like, "This
No,
is this is a bit
I
much."
found that oddly fascinating, actually.
I think that comes down to as well. I
I,
think Morena is a potentially very fascinating.
yeah, I like her. I like her, actually. I totally do. I think she's a very interesting, she's a relatable character.
Yeah.
Let me put it that way.
So
Mm.
we learn her backstory. She's a carnival orphan victim. Horrible things happen to her as a child, and as a result, she wants to basically kill everyone. That's it. Everyone deserves to die. She has her contagion ability, where the people she kisses spreads her saliva with. If they kill enough people, they gain Nen. So at the same time as Kurapika introducing Nen to these people, she's introducing Nen to these even more dangerous people. And up until this point in the story, the Hunter Association has made a fact of you don't give Nen to everyone. This is a very specialized thing. So I think this is going to be one of those factors that is potentially going to play into the downfall of so many characters involved in this ship. I don't know if it's going to bleed into the real world at any point, because the consequences of that would be very long lasting. But yes, I think especially in the latest batch, there was a lot to like get to grips with Morena as a character now. And like her, considering Tserriednich is her benefactor as well, I'm compelled to see how they interact. Lots of storylines, lots happening all at once. A couple final things I wanted to ask then, Enzo. The anime. Do we think we're going to get an anime at some point? If we do you think it is going to be when it's fully over? So in that case, are we talking like summer 2035 when we get this happening? Or do you think the anime is like has a good enough stopping point that we maybe don't need it at this point?
My general default position on such questions is follow the money. And there's money to be made from more anime with Hunter x Hunter, and therefore I think more anime will eventually happen. And when will it happen? Before this arc is finished, because this arc isn't going to be finished for probably a minimum of 10 more years, if we're lucky. I suspect there's going to be something unexpected, some twist in the whole saga of the actual serialization itself. Something is going to come along that we don't expect and take it in a completely different direction. That's just a gut feeling I have. I don't know what it is, but I think it's going to happen. But at some point, somebody's going to say, you know what? There's enough material here. We have 80 chapters, whatever it is. We have 90 chapters. We don't know where it's going. We don't know what's happening, or something unexpected has happened and we do know where it's going. Let's make 24 episodes. Let's make two cores. Let's do this part of it. And because the bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, and we don't know when this is all going to be finished, but people will want to watch it. It's still Hunter x Hunter, and there's a demand for it, and as such, it'll happen. That's my gut feeling.
Yeah, I think it's likely to come at some point. My feeling is actually I think it would be when the arc is over. That's just where my head goes, and I feel if I was to predict how long the arc is going to be, we're at 71 chapters. It's so hard to like try to guess from Togashi's head, especially when we had so much setup. And like you say, something it's bound to go horribly wrong. Something is going to change and upend everything that we see. And when Togashi's playing chess with like 400 pieces on the board, and each one of these 400 pieces has the ability to do something different, it's like how can we even like guess what he's going to do next? But I do think we're probably easily over 100 chapters. I wouldn't be surprised if we're about halfway through at this point, so maybe like 130 140 chapters for this arc is my guess.
I think I would have said if he was going to be live long enough to do it, I would have guessed even more, to be honest. But how long would it take him to do 150 chapters at the rate of, like 10 chapters even 10 chapters every year? Okay, we'd be finished in 8 or 9 years. Okay. I think we'd all take that in a heartbeat right now. But we're slipping behind the 10 chapters a year rate now. So who knows? Who knows? I wouldn't be shocked if he had this planned out as a 200 chapter arc. I wouldn't be shocked.
I mean, that would be crazy. Chimera Anarch is 133, so
Yes, it is.
it's going to be the question of does it exceed the amount of chapters that got? So yes, I have a feeling it's going to be around there. That's maybe my guess. Maybe above or below it ever so slightly. In this arc that is so dense and complex, hopefully this made some sense of all the different players and things that are happening and affirms that Togashi is crazy. Let's jump over to recommendations then. I'll kick off, and like is sometimes the case with Hunter x Hunter, it's kind of hard to make a recommendation. This one I think was especially hard because, like I said, what is even comparable to this arc that we're getting right now? I went for another one of my all-time favorites, which is Ooku: The Inner Chambers by Fumi Yoshinaga. And the reason why I do that is because of the succession contest element. So they both are very intense political scheming. This is more of a death match, but that is like a family saga. Ooku has like the scale where it's telling it over many centuries and different generations, whereas Succession Contest is the opposite. And like Togashi has limited the time and the space, so everything feels so much more on top of each other, so many layers. And even Ooku, spanning over various generations, was quite dense, and there was always something happening, machinations happening. But Succession Contest just feels even more ridiculous in terms of corruption, backstabbing, all these things happening. But yes, I think if you want that proper political intrigue, I think Ooku is one of the manga that come to mind most in terms of like hitting that spot. And maybe because I love Ooku and what it does in that respect is why my brain is tickled so much with the Succession Contest arc.
It's a good choice. It's funny. I made my pick for, I think, largely the same reasons, and went to a Japanese historical fantasy for, again, largely, I think, the same reasons you did. One with a totally different tone and more in line with Succession arc, although it spans a longer period. It mostly stays it does stay in a single generation, and that's Hyouge Mono by Yamada Yoshihiro, which is sort of an alternative take on the whole Sengoku period, and then leading into Nobunaga and Hideyoshi, and the aftermath of that with the Tokugawa coming to power, which ties us into Ooku, I suppose, and mostly through the eyes of a Fruta Oribe, who is an important historical figure, but not one that's well known probably to people who aren't like hardcore Japanese history geeks. But he was like he was the second tea master, the one who succeeded Sen no Rikyu, who is also a very, very important character in the story. But he was also a warrior, and the whole point of the series is kind of this clash between the warrior and the esthete, the tea ceremony and the warrior, and not just the tea ceremony, but art in general, and which was a very important crossover in this period of Japanese history with the Japanese nobility. The reason I chose it, there is also, by the way, an anime of this, which covers maybe 2/3 of the manga. It's definitely a worthwhile watch for the anime itself. It's excellent. It has an incredible voice cast, but the manga is the definitive version. The reason I chose Hyouge, again, like you talked about with Ooku, but here it's about this political machinations. That what you have in Hyouge is a lot of really strange, really bizarre, sometimes sociopathic, but also often brilliant people who are one thing on the surface and something else underneath, and go through a process of a very of a very systematic, very mannered, superficial dance they do with each other, while underneath it they're all plotting to kill each other and come out on top at the end, and balance this all against their own personal tastes and their own personal pleasures that they want to pursue. It's a very kind of a ritualistic dance that's masking something much more animalistic underneath. And if that's not symbolic, I don't know what is. And so I feel like in a certain way that has a kind of a crossover with what's going on with this whole succession arc. I think there is some similar element there. I actually think Hyouge is more similar tonally to Succession Arc than Ooku is, if I was to compare. Ooku is kind of a tonal opposite in a way, and whereas I think Hyouge is even more over the top tonally, but it does have some more similarities to it, and it's almost like in some sense that Succession Arc has like a hybrid of the two. So that's my pick, Hyouge by Yamada Yoshihiro.
Yeah, I think it's a nice combination of both of them in terms of tone and like the political elements. And yes, noteworthy that they're both historical series set in Japan. I think definitely what he's established here does feel like it could be a historical epic.
Absolutely.
Just so happens
It's almost as yeah, it's like it almost feels like he's telling it almost feels like he's telling a history that really happened, actually.
Yeah.
It does have that vibe to it.
We do have a rating that we are going to give. I'll kick off with mine, and I'm going to provide an asterisk for this because my score is somewhat predictive at this point. I cannot predict the roadmap that Togashi has. None of us can. But in how much I've enjoyed it so far, how much intellectually I just think it's incredible, and how it works for me in terms of especially the political intrigue, I'm kind of foreseeing how I think it could all come together by all the pieces that are there, influenced by how much I've enjoyed it already. I'm going to be very bold, and I'm going to give it the same score as Chimera Antark, 98. Now, I think there is a chance it could go lower, depending on how things play out. But I've said it before, this is actually my favourite arc in the series. Is it the best arc? No, it's not done. And no, I don't think it reaches the highs that Chimera Ant has. I also would say that Chimera Ant arc reached those highs in the section of the arc that has not yet been explored here. Yes, I'm just doing a bit of predictive estimation of how I think I'm going to continue to enjoy it, because this arc was made for me. If Togashi is doing it for himself, it just so happens he's doing it for me as well. So everything that he's doing, pretty much everything works for me. So yeah, that's my score.
You're a list maker. You're a, you know, you're someone who likes to write stuff down, who likes to organize stuff, who likes. So this whole, I agree with you. It's kind of, it kind of fits your mental approach in a certain way. I guess I can see. I do think you make a fair point about the score you give Chimera Ant based on parts of this arc that would not have happened yet. So fair point. However, I can only give a score based on. I feel like I can't give a presumptive score. I can't give a predictive score. I can only give a score based on um, where what we've seen up to now. And I'm almost tempted to give a score like a hyphen score or a slash score, where I give an intellectual score and an engagement score, because I think they would be very different. But that's kind of a cop out. So what I can do in lieu of that really is to take those two numbers and average them out in my head. And what I get when I average those two numbers out is an 83. So the intellectual score is much higher than the engagement score. I can't get past the point now where where I'm at the point right now where I don't really care that much about what happens to most of the characters here or the larger situation. And I can't give it a score that doesn't reflect that lack of interest in that. I also think there are some structural flaws with this arc, which I'd knock it down a couple points for, that we've kind of covered already, above and beyond that aspect of it. I do think it is intellectually absolutely fascinating. I do think he's dealing with some, really doing some unique, groundbreaking stuff here. And, you know, I freely admit that my Hunter x Hunter experience, I did read the manga, but not in real time. I'm not shaped by having lived through the hiatuses that people who were manga originals lived with. And I didn't take me 8 years to consume the Chimera Ant arc, you know. I get when, if someone would say, you know, Enzo, you're not being fair to this because you're only going based on your own experience and you don't know what it was like. You're right. I don't know what that was like, but I do know what this is like, and all I can do is give it a score based on what this is like for me. So my score is 83 for me. If you ask me when it's over, assuming that he's around to finish it, I may give you a very different answer. You say your score could come down, my score could easily go up.
I mean, very fair, valid. I always knew that this was the arc that does the least for you. I think in terms of what you love the most about Hunter x Hunter. I just have hope that when it all comes together, when hopefully eventually it does get an anime, it will be one that does get bumped up, because I don't think it deserves last place. But of course, I would say that because it's like tied for first place with me, and yeah, I think it resonates a lot. Now, we have been doing this for the whole series, so to give an idea of where we are, yes, Chimera Ant and Succession are kind of joint first for me. At the moment, I would probably still put Chimera Ant above it if I want to say it's quote unquote the best. Then I would say Succession Contest. I think third for me is 13th Chairman Election Arc, which would surprise me, actually. That was one of the most surprising improvements of rereading it. And I think that was opposite of this current arc in so many ways, where he, in condensed amount of time, managed so much and was quite concise. I like York New and Heaven's Arena a lot. I think you helped me enjoy Heaven's Arena a lot more when we discussed it. And then I would say lower tier for me are Greed Island, Hunter Exam, and Zoidic Family. But I still gave them all like 88, 83-ish. So those are still very, very high scores, especially compared to what we give typically on this. So yeah, as I know you've got your list as well, if there are any other ones you want to run through.
Well, yeah, obviously Chimera Ant is the top for me. I gave it a 97, which I think my 97 in a sense is higher than your 98, because you've gone up to 100 for a couple things and I've never gone higher than 97 or 98. So that's how highly I rank Chimera Ant. I am higher than you on a couple of these. Heaven's Arena is my second favorite along with York New. They're kind of They're my joint second favorite at 93, and I was very pleased that you gave Heaven's Arena a higher score than I expected you to. I think partly because of my influence, I'm proud to say. York New is a hard one to disagree on. I think objectively, they're tied for second for me. I think York New is better. I love Heaven's Arena more. Then Greed Island at 92, Hunter Exam 91. Zoldyck family, the chairman election arc I gave a 91, which is higher than I was when I experienced it the first time. But going back and rereading it for the show, I liked it better the second time around. And then among the major arcs, if we're going to call it a major arc, is Zoldyck family. I gave an 83. You gave it an 86. We weren't too different on that. I think it was quite good for as short as it was. And obviously, even though I gave Zoldyck and Succession Contest the same score, if you ask me, which of those is the more essential, which I think is the quote unquote better arc, I'm going to take Succession Contest over Zoldyck family, even though I gave them the same score. But I just think, there are different ways you get to a score. Zoldyck family is an 83 based on, being somewhat limited in its scope and accomplishing it quite well. Succession Contest is the same score for being almost unlimited in scope, not as successfully accomplishing it, but trying to do so much more that it succeeds in doing more. So yeah, a disagreement, but I mean, it's all relative. I mean, we're still talking about Hunter x Hunter here. Hunter x Hunter is a series with shades of greatness. It's not a series of good and bad. It's a series of great and more great. And that's kind of how I look at all the arcs of Hunter x Hunter, including this one.
Final thing then is we've done a lot of ratings and rankings, giving our list of all the arcs. We've discussed every arc as we've gone through it. Now, Enzo, it's come the time. Let's give our final overall rating and review of the series Hunter x Hunter as we have it right now up to date. I'm happy to go first on this one. My score is going to be kind of reflective of what we discussed here, as well as the Chimera Ant arc, because it's the same score as both of them. I'm giving Hunter x Hunter a 98 overall. The reason why I think I give it 98, even though if you took my average of every arc, it would be lower, is that to me, Chimera Ant, Hunter election arc, and then also the Succession Contest arc, those being the three most recent arcs and also accumulating to be basically half of the series at this point, it feels like, in my opinion, I feel like Togashi's gotten only better as he's progressed throughout the series. I only see an upward trajectory, so it's not really a true average, but a feeling of the highlights of the series and where it comes. So that's 98. If it wasn't already apparent from all our discussions, it is one of my favorite manga and anime of all time. It's top 5 for both of those lists. I think it's not only one of the best Weekly Shonen Jump titles, I think it's one of the best shonen and manga titles, just period. So now it's your time to hype it up. And so what's your final score for Hunter x Hunter? And can you try and summarize your feelings in 1 minute?
It's probably the best Weekly Jump series ever. Probably the best shonen ever. Probably among, it's in my top 10 manga of all time for sure. And the main point I'm going to agree with you, as boring as that is, for me not least, is my score will likewise be higher than the average of the cumulative ranks, because I think when you look at a series as long as this series is, and I'm not even talking, you can set aside the hiatuses and the number of years, just the number of chapters. It's a very, very long series. You have to take into account not only when a series is that long, but when an author takes as many risks as Togashi takes, that you're never impossible to achieve a consistent score among all those storylines. It's impossible. So averaging the score of arcs for a series like this would not be a fair way to judge. So in that context, I'm going to give Hunter x Hunter a 97, which reflects to me the fact that it is an absolute work of a masterpiece by a genius. The man who I'm fond of saying, he accomplishes things that no other mangaka would even try. He makes mistakes. He missteps occasionally, and not all the arcs are as great as the other arcs, but I respect the fact that he never rests on his laurels. He's always taking chances. And I respect the fact that he's managed to maintain his, clearly, judging from his most recent chapters, which are not my favorites, but nevertheless, it's clear from reading them that his love for the series has not declined at all. He still loves Hunter x Hunter. He's still passionate about it. He would rather not have the series be serialized than do it in a way that didn't meet his standards for it. So all that taking into consideration, basically, like my 97 is roughly equivalent to your score contextually. It's right up at the very, very top of my ranking standard. I don't know off the top of my head I ever gave another series a higher score than 97. I think I gave YKK that. And there may be one or two others I would give that to. In fact, there probably are. But that's how I feel. It is the best shonen. It is the best battle shonen. It's the best jump series. It's one that I love I love passionately, and I think I always will.
And thankfully, it seems like we're going to be able to continue loving it because, as of the time of
Yes.
us recording, it seems like Togashi is back on Twitter and he's putting out these updates, and we might have a batch soonish. Fingers crossed. It seems like potentially by end of the year. And as someone who loves the Succession Contest arc, I can't wait. It's been one hell of a journey discussing the series. Thank you, Enzo.
Thank
I
you.
think if anything, if it's made us appreciate it and love even more facets of the series. It's fun to just gush about a series we love. So yes, thank you for discussing it.
It's been fun.
And thank you everyone for listening. Stay tuned for all of our weekly Shonen Jump episodes that we do whenever there's a new serialization. And if Hunter x Hunter does come back, that may be the time and place that we'll be bringing it up. So stay tuned.
And remember, you can smile.